Every day, millions of planes, cars, trains, and boats take off for their desired destinations. Whether it is for business or leisure, all these modes of transportation leave lasting impacts on the environment. Most of them are negative. As time goes on, air pollution begins to play more of a factor in our lives. Join me as I take a look at the effects air pollution has on the world and what we can all do to help this growing concern.
Well, yes, air pollution is a growing concern, as in general for the whole global population. And developing countries such as India and China all have rapidly expanding populations. And the wealth in these nations are also increasing, thus more cars and more electricity and other natural resources needs to be provided to those countries, and therefore much more air pollution will come out of those countries. Okay, so outside in the street, the most of the modes of transportation that you see is usually motor vehicles, such as cars and buses, and therefore transportation such as boats, airplanes, and other modes aren't as major a contributor to air pollution as cars and vehicles. And as said before, in developing countries such as India, China, and some parts of Africa, many upper and middle class families are trying to get their own vehicles and cars to replace their public transportation. And these extra cars will cause even more air pollution in their countries and in respect to the whole global community. Well, first of all, when you're buying a vehicle, you can always look at the vehicle and say, what are the emissions? How much gas does this vehicle use? And that's the first most important choice, is choosing your vehicle. You might be able to choose a hybrid, or you might be able to choose a low-emission vehicle, compared to rather like a Land Rover or Jeep that uses a lot more fuel. And as well, regular maintenance to your vehicle also helps keep gas consumption low, such as keeping the pressure in your tires, and as well making sure that you don't constantly accelerate and stop when you're driving. And so just drive at a smooth pace to make sure that oil consumption is even and low. Okay, so as you know, our modern society is really based off our hydrocarbon and fossil fuels. Fuels such as coal, oil, and other stuff help power electricity in our vehicles and are major contributors to air pollution. So therefore, there are many things that you can do to reduce your air pollution, such as you can ride public transport, which helps reduce your vehicle footprint. As well, you can eat locally, which reduces the amount of fuel that is needed to transport your food to the dinner table. And as well, you can always plant trees in your backyard to help the ecosystem take in some greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, and then convert them to gases that we can use such as oxygen. Okay, and as well, all our electricity is mostly generated from hydrocarbon fuels such as coal, fossil fuels, and oil again. So one of the major ways you can also help reduce air pollution is by reducing your consumption of electricity. Okay. In general, many developed countries such as Canada and the U.S. have had relatively stable emission levels, but however, developing countries, especially India and China, are having more and more people come to their urban centers, and therefore take up more electricity and have a greater need for motors. Therefore, their emissions are rising very quickly. China, for example, recently had very, very, very small emission rates, but over time their their imports of gasoline and coal have skyrocketed, as there has been a very, very large need for electricity in their major urban centers, as bigger and better factories are being developed in countries, and as well, more people are moving from the countryside to the urban centers, and thus they require more modern necessities.
400,000.
Probably, I don't know, like 7 million, maybe. Yeah.
1.5 million.
I don't know, can't be that many. 500,000 maybe?
At the rate that we're polluting the air, we can already see modern current time examples such as in Beijing, New Delhi, and other cities in India and China that have large amounts of people with large amounts of motor vehicles and other pollutants. And therefore, we can see from those examples that if we continue on our current path of air pollution, we can see that our environment is going to get a lot worse. It's going to be a lot more bleak. We're going to see more days with smog, and as well, our health itself will deteriorate as respiratory problems will increase, and of course, our standard of living will decrease. Developed countries usually separate due to their economic factors, such as developed countries have more industry, have more money, while developing countries are still developing their economy and therefore don't have as much money. Usually developed countries have relatively high but stable air pollution, as they have the money to ever increase their industry and refine their industry to lower air pollution, and as well they have the money to find suitable alternatives to dirtier fuels such as coal and oil with relatively cleaner fuels such as nuclear, wind power, and etc. However, in developing countries, people often don't look to the environment as much and regard economic growth as the major aim of whatever they do. For example, people would not take into consideration the environment when setting up their factories or planning their daily lives. And often the governments don't even do this as well.
It is apparent that air pollution will continue to leave an impact on our environment. We can either let the world's air become more and more polluted every day, or we can start to take a stand towards this growing concern. It is the small things that we do that will have the greatest impacts. Turning off your car's engine as opposed to idling is a great way to stop air pollution. Thinking about cars' emissions before purchasing your next vehicle is also something to think about. Think about which cars are best for the environment. These are 2 examples of how we can all reduce air pollution. The choice is in our hands, and the future of the environment will depend on the decisions our generation makes. What will you do?